Last Friday, Donald Trump acknowledged and declared that the Golan Heights, which is a disputed territory, does in fact belong to Israel. And we're gonna get to the details on that declaration in a second. But the more late-breaking news on this has to do with escalated violence between Israel and the Palestinians. So Israel has launched airstrikes in the Gaza Strip and deployed extra troops to the border on Monday, today, promising a strong response to the longest range Palestinian rocket attack to cause casualties in years. So this escalation of violence did begin with the Palestinian side. Several Israelis were wounded near Tel Aviv, according to reports, by the morning rocket attack. The Gaza Health Ministry said 5 Palestinians were wounded by the initial wave of retaliatory strikes. So timing is important here. Of course, the escalation in violence happened after Donald Trump made this declaration in regard to the Golan Heights, although I don't have enough evidence to draw a direct link between the two. Also, this comes just 2 weeks before an election in which Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is fighting for his political life after a decade in power, campaigning on a tough line against Palestinian militants. Beset by corruption scandals, he faces a strong challenge from a centrist coalition led by a top general. So every time his election or the election is near, it does appear that there is an escalation of violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Well, that is awfully convenient. So let's talk about other possibilities as to why this violence has flared up. Now, remember about a year ago, there was Palestinians who went to the border between Gaza Strip and Israel. And that anniversary is coming up around March 30th. So obviously that's near. That might be a reason. And a lot of Palestinians were killed for simply just trying to walk towards the border. And some of them were not even walking towards the border. There were doctors and nurses that were taking care of people there. And so a lot of people died there. That might be a reason why some Palestinians led by Hamas might be firing rockets into Israel. But I think the third possibility is the strongest, which is the right wing benefit from war and violence. And that doesn't mean just the Israeli side, it's also the Palestinian side. So if there is perpetual conflict, Hamas seems like the protector of the Palestinian people and have a reason for their existence. But if there is peace, well, the militant group Hamas becomes less relevant. So 2 weeks before Netanyahu's elections, they do him a giant favor by launching rockets into Israel. And if Netanyahu gets reelected, well, Hamas is back in business. And they could continue that conflict for as long as the eye can see. So it's the right wing on all sides that perpetually drive all of us into more and more violence, conflict, and wars for their own political benefit. And so Netanyahu has to be thrilled about this. What a gift 2 weeks before the election, as he's mired in a corruption scandal where he could actually go to jail. And now he's like, Hamas is attacking, I am your protector, and I will strike back, and he launches missiles into the Palestinian territories. So yes, I definitely blame Hamas. And then Israel's countering here, but I get why Israel's countering.
Yeah.
But look, don't get me wrong, we can go back further for that, and then beyond that, when the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's always, but before that, the Israelis did this, and then before that, the Palestinians did that, and it goes on and on forever. And yes, the occupation is horrible, unacceptable, and is the root cause of all of these problems. But nonetheless, that does not excuse any rockets being fired into Israel.
Agreed. And one other part of this that I do want to just delve into with a little more detail is how Donald Trump is helping to stoke these tensions, right? In a completely unnecessary way. So let's go back to the conversation about the Golan Heights. I want to skip ahead to graphic 32. So last Friday, when the Mueller report was completed and the news cycle focused specifically on that, there wasn't enough emphasis on how Trump was doing a huge favor to Benjamin Netanyahu by making this declaration about the Golan Heights. He had tweeted, after 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability. Now, this is something that the UN completely disagrees with, and it has to do with what has been perceived as the annexation of Golan Heights by the Israeli government. Now, this totally caught Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, off guard, as Trump's foreign policy often does. Hours earlier, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told journalists that the United States' longstanding policy on Golan Heights had not changed. And then Trump makes this declaration, and sure enough, he has to kind of pivot toward making it seem as though he knew what was going on. The United Nations, though, has rejected Israel's occupation of the Golan Heights since 1967, when Israeli troops seized the 400 square miles of rocky highlands from Syria during the Arab-Israeli War. And I also want to read you a quote by, by someone who has been part of the negotiations, the peace negotiations. And this was, I think, the most illuminating point of all. Look, if you start making exceptions for this type of annexation, well then when other countries, Russia for instance, annex other parts of Ukraine, well then can't they turn around and look at the US government and be like, you can't criticize us, you stood by Israel when Israel did this. Right? You helped Israel declare its sovereignty and its ownership of the Golan Heights, so why can't we do it? Who are you to meddle in this?
So you might not care much about what the Syrian government thinks, but you should, not because they're the good guys, they're not, but because of stability. Trump said, oh, this will help the region's stability. No, it won't. Syria called the move, quote, a blatant attack on its sovereignty and territorial integrity. So now Syria will be in even greater conflict with Israel. And then Israel will then want to counterattack, and round we go. So all that Trump has done is added fuel to that fire, violated international law again. And then with not telling his Secretary of State or anyone else or negotiating this ahead of time, once again, we wonder what his real motivations are. It might be that he just woke up one day and was like, no, I'm just gonna give Golan Heights to Israel, despite the overall united consensus of the rest of the world. Yeah, that's possible. He's Donald Trump. He doesn't care to do any homework, doesn't care to check with allies or even his own government. Or it could be that it's another deal that Trump is doing. Who knows? I mean, he's got secret deals everywhere. So why wouldn't you tell your own Secretary of State, who's a Trump loyalist, that you're gonna do this? So this is a very bad move, and annexing the Golan Heights does not help Israel's security. It hurts Israel's security. To have a little bit of advantage on the ground in terms of the terrain that you have is not worth the instability that comes from annexing territory that others believe, when the whole world, with the exception of us, does not believe is yours. You lose the moral high ground, and it continues the conflict ad infinitum. And the Israelis are never going to get peace of mind this way. So we wish that everyone on all sides would actually push towards peace, but today is not a good day for that. Apparently none of them have.
I do want to read you the exact quote that I alluded to earlier, because I think it's important. It was from Martin Indyk, and he's actually a former American ambassador to Israel. And here's what he had to say about this. Putin will use this as a pretext to justify Russia's annexation of Crimea. The Israeli right will use it as a pretext for Israel's annexation of the West Bank. It is truly gratuitous. It is a truly gratuitous move by Donald Trump. And it is. I mean, this wasn't something that was being debated. This wasn't something that was being pushed for, but he took it upon himself to make this declaration, and it will have consequences in the future.
Yeah, the only part I disagree with is it's not gratuitous. He's doing it for a reason. We're just not sure exactly what that reason is. And his own government is not sure what that reason is, because he's keeping it secret. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.